It started the way all slow storms do, subtle changes in the air that most people miss until they're drenched. Back then, her name was Karina. We met in a cramped lecture hall in early September, when the leaves in Uxbridge just begin to consider turning. She was psychology, I was mechanical engineering. She teased me for calling Young the gearbox guy, and I ribbed her for needing help changing the batteries in her smoke detector. Karina carried this ridiculous sunflower yellow tote everywhere, stuffed with things no sane person could need in daily life: a stress ball, pliers, and even once, inexplicably, a bag of googly eyes. She was chaos in motion, and I was precise, clean lines and logical plans. I thought we balanced each other. She used to say I was her compass, and I believed she was my wind. We dated for 3 years. Beautiful years. Camping in Killarney, night drives with her feet on the dash, the stray cat she named Bandit who refused to like anyone but her. I built her a custom easel out of aluminum tubing, she painted portraits of us in places we hadn't yet been. We had arguments, yes. But they felt like jazz riffs, discordant, but somehow making sense by the end. We got married in a backyard with fairy lights and cheap Prosecco. She wore a dress she found at a vintage shop and a crown of rosemary and mint. I remember thinking I could live 100 lives and not deserve a moment like that. But Karina began to shift. At first, it was small. She started quoting Instagram influencers who talked about vibrational energy. She bought crystals and said our houseplants had auras. She'd always had a flair for the mystical, but this was different. She went on a retreat in Muskoka for women in transition. I laughed and said, "Transitioning to what?" She didn't laugh. Then came the books on personal freedom. Then a new yoga group. Then a new wardrobe, sharp and curated, like she was dressing for someone else. I told myself this was just growth. People evolve. I tried too. I read the books she liked, cooked Thai dishes from scratch, even went to 2 yoga sessions. But there was a gap forming, quiet but vast. Our dinner conversations went from soft teasing to clipped exchanges. Where once she'd light up when I walked in, now she glanced up like I was a postman delivering mail. I asked if something was wrong. She said I was imagining things. Maybe I was. Then came Marco. He was just a name on her phone at first. A motivational speaker from her workshop, she claimed. I asked to meet him. She said, "Why would you need to?" One night, I saw a message flash on her screen while she was showering. Just one line: "Last night was unreal. You always leave me hungry." I stared at that glowing screen like it was a grenade without a pin. She emerged from the steam, saw my face, and followed my gaze. And then something broke. Not in me. In her. Not fear. Not guilt. Just irritation. She grabbed the phone, locked it, and said, "You had no right." I left that night with nothing but my wallet and the sound of my own blood pounding in my ears. But this is just where the storm begins. The first week away was a fog of rented couches and gas station meals. I stayed with my brother, Ethan, who had a spare room that smelled like the inside of a vacuum cleaner. He didn't say much, just slid a beer my way every night and let me be. Sometimes silence is the loudest support. I'd lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to pinpoint the moment she slipped away. Was it the retreat? The new friends? Or was she always halfway out the door, and I was too love-struck to notice? On the 4th night, I dreamed of her laugh. Not the polite one she gave strangers, but her real one, raw and sudden, like it surprised her too. I woke up with tears on my temples, and it pissed me off. You never think a memory can bruise you, but there it was. By day 6, my phone buzzed. A message from her. Short. Cold. Please don't take your tools from the basement. I need them for my projects. My tools. The ones I bought with saved wages from my first job. The same ones I let her use when she got into upcycling furniture. She once used a torque wrench to open a bottle of kombucha. Now she wanted custody of them like we were negotiating a divorce on a game show. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat in the parking lot of a Home Depot for 2 hours, sipping lukewarm coffee, trying to remember who the hell I had become. I used to be decisive. Proud. Now I was a ghost with receipts. And yet, humor, that old and twisted friend, paid a visit. I walked into the store and bought a brand new set of tools. Top shelf. Chrome polished. I thought, if I'm going to rebuild my life, I might as well start with a damn socket wrench. Didn't have the heart to tell the cashier I was mentally measuring the space between my wife's truths and her lies, which, by that point, was about the size of a brothel built by a drunk contractor with a bad memory. I figured if I charged by the square foot of bullshit, I'd be a damn millionaire. Later that night, Ethan sat across from me as I nursed another beer. "You still love her?" he asked, quiet. I opened my mouth to lie. But I didn't. "Yeah," I whispered. "But I don't trust the sound of her voice anymore." It was true. Her voice, once warm and full of melody, now felt like a sales pitch I hadn't asked for. And I wasn't buying. That night, I began to wonder, was I mourning her, or just the idea of her? Was it Karina I missed, or the man I used to be when I was with her? The answer didn't come quickly. But it was coming. By week 2, I was a man haunted by pings and red notification dots. I downloaded an app, a tracking one. Not proud of it. But I wasn't trying to be noble anymore. I synced it with an old smartwatch I had left in the junk drawer, one Karina had started wearing for her hot girl walks. Now I had a digital map of her movements, and what it showed didn't line up with her words. She told mutual friends she was spending her time journaling and meditating, focusing inward. But the map said otherwise. Thursday night? Downtown loft. Saturday morning? Some organic cafe in a part of town we never went to. Sunday afternoon? Marco's seminar. Of course it was Marco. Ethan tried to keep me grounded. He'd toss a Nerf football at my head every time I got too deep in my obsession. "You gonna track her aura next?" he joked once. I didn't laugh. I finally broke down and drove past the loft. Didn't get out. Just parked across the street like a teenage boy on a bad revenge fantasy. A blue light lit up one of the windows. I saw 2 shadows cross and then pause. I don't know why that got me. Maybe because I realized in that moment she wasn't lost. She was gone. There's a difference. I drove home and pulled over halfway just to breathe. I sat there in the dark, heat running, watching snow start to fall. And then I did something irrational. I called her. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice was annoyed, not worried. "What is it?" "I just needed to hear you say something," I said. A pause. Then, "Don't do this. I just wanted to remember what your voice sounded like before it turned into a stranger's." She hung up. That was the first night I screamed. Not words. Just sound. I drove until I found an abandoned parking lot and let out something raw and loud enough to make a flock of birds scatter from the trees. I wanted to rip the seat out of the car. I wanted to punch the moon. But instead, I just wept. Then, I did what any self-respecting man spiraling into paranoia would do. I called my friend Dave. He was the kind of guy who owned 2 drones, not because he was a filmmaker, but because you never know when surveillance might come in handy. An hour later, we were flying one outside that loft. "Dude," he said, guiding the tiny machine with precision, "this is some peak movie villain behavior." "Then roll the damn film," I muttered. The drone window gave us a pixelated view through the curtains. It was hard to make out details, but one thing was clear: Marco was there. Shirtless. "Bingo," Dave whispered. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt hollow. I didn't speak to Karina for 3 more days. The silence, for once, felt like mercy. Ethan had a guy's weekend trip planned, leaving me with the house, the fridge, and the ghosts. I planned to drink cheap scotch and maybe cry into a pizza box. But life, as usual, had other plans. It started with a knock at the door. A knock that sounded like guilt with arthritis. "Karina didn't tell you," came the voice before I even opened it. She must have forgotten. Classic Karina. "I'm here for the week." And there she was, Eleanor Brzezinski. Karina's mother. 5'3" of relentless questions, pursed lips, and opinions about cookware. Dragging a wheelie suitcase that squeaked like a dying ferret. "Oh," I said. "Because what the hell else do you say to that?" I tried her phone, but she's not answering, Eleanor continued, bustling past me into the hallway like she owned the title deed. I hope she didn't run off to one of those commune things again. "You know she once tried to convince me she could talk to bees?" "She's around," I muttered, trying to catch up. She didn't mention this visit. Well, I'm here now. I brought banana bread. With walnuts. Unless you're still on that paleo nonsense. I blinked. Somewhere in another dimension, the version of me that had a happy marriage just high-fived himself. Eleanor moved like a sitcom character, always 2 cups of tea ahead of the conversation. She unpacked like she was nesting, throwing on her floral robe and using my good bath towel. The one I kept for dignity. She commandeered the kitchen by 7 a.m. the next morning. You look thin, she said, cracking eggs into a bowl. Is Karina feeding you? I didn't know how to tell her that Karina was currently feeding her emotional needs to a man named Marco with a 6-pack and a podcast. So I just nodded. Work okay? She asked, sitting across from me with her banana bread and interrogation face. Yeah, I lied. She squinted. You're lying. You always blink too much when you lie. You get that from your side of the family. I had to hand it to her. Eleanor was an emotional battering ram. But part of me respected it. She saw the decay in Karina long before I did. By night 3, I found her on the couch watching reruns of a game show while knitting what I suspected was a noose in pastel yarn. You still love her? She asked without looking at me. I don't know. She used to look at you like you were the only lamp in a darkroom, she said. Now she looks like she's hoping you'll flicker out. I didn't answer. She paused her knitting. You know, when her father left, she never cried. Not once. Just folded his shirts and left them in a box by the door. Then she went to her room and made a vision board. That's your Karina. She replaces grief with arts and crafts. Something in me cracked at that. Not out of rage, but sadness. For Karina. For me. For a love that had turned into a DIY project held together by delusion and Instagram quotes. You want tea? Eleanor asked, already getting up. Sure. She brought it back with the grace of a woman who'd long stopped waiting for men to get it together. The next morning, she was gone. Just a note on the counter. You're stronger than you think. Fix it or leave it, but don't rot in it. Love, E. And just like that, the noise of the past few days turned to silence again. Except this time, it was the kind of silence that tells you something's coming. And it's big. 2 days after Eleanor left, the silence turned sour. I had this bright idea, real genius level stuff, that maybe I could still fix things. Patch the hull with duct tape and denial. So I texted Karina. Simple. Dinner? Just talk. No pressure. She replied, if you want closure, that's fine. Closure. Like I was a haunted Airbnb she needed to get a priest for. I booked a table at Finley's, the little Italian place we used to go to when money was tight and love was easy. I even wore the shirt she once said made me look like a decent man who could maybe build a deck. She arrived late, looking like she just stepped out of a photo shoot for a Scandinavian divorce magazine. Stylish. Detached. Expensively indifferent. I stood to greet her. She sat without meeting my eyes. So, I said, stupidly, how have you been? Good. Focused, she replied. Then added, you look tired. Thanks. I've been practicing disappointment in front of a mirror. She didn't laugh. Strike one. The waiter came. We ordered. Mine was comfort food. Hers was vegan and full of judgment. I tried to steer the conversation gently. Asked about her paintings. Her workshops. She answered like she was reading a script. Finally, I just said it. Is it Marco? Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. I don't want to get into that, she said. I leaned in. Well, I do. Because while you were out finding your vibrations, I was finding out that you've been cheating on me with a TED Talk on legs who sells protein powder in dreams. That got her. Her eyes sharpened. Don't you dare reduce him. To what? A life coach with abs and commitment issues? She stood. Napkin falling to the floor like a white flag someone changed their mind about. I knew this was a mistake, she said. You said closure, I replied, standing too. But what you meant was control the narrative. You didn't want closure. You wanted credit for being civil. People were staring now. I should have cared. But I didn't. I was a man arguing in an overpriced restaurant over emotional embezzlement. Dignity had already left the building. You're just bitter, she hissed. Of course I'm bitter, I snapped. You left me mid-sentence and pretended it was spiritual growth. We both stood there, breathing heavily over the ruins of linguine and respect. Then she turned and walked out. I sat back down. Alone. The waiter approached with caution, like I was a bear caught in a bear trap but still holding a steak knife. Dessert menu, he asked, voice tentative. I nodded. Just bring me something sweet that won't lie to me. Back home, I stared at the wedding photo still hanging in the hallway. She looked young. Wild-eyed. Like someone who hadn't yet decided if love was a destination or just a scenic detour. And me? I looked like a man who thought he'd just won the lottery. Turns out I was holding the ticket upside down. I laughed. Then cried. Then laughed again because somewhere along the way I'd become the kind of man who cried over rigatoni and metaphors. Self-pity's a hell of a drug. But self-awareness? That's the hangover. A week passed. I didn't call her. She didn't call me. We lived in the same town like rival kingdoms at the edge of a ceasefire, just waiting for the next cannonball of passive aggression. Then came the text, I left a few things at the house. Can we talk? I should have said no. Or nothing. But instead, I replied, tomorrow. 5 p.m., don't be late. She showed up at 5:03. Which felt right. She walked in like she owned the lease on my heartbreak. Same scent. Same silence. She scanned the room like she was taking mental stock of what she could still claim emotionally. You moved the couch, she said. No, I said. You moved out. I just adjusted the battlefield. She half smiled. That dangerous kind. The kind that says I'm not sorry, but I'm winning. You always were dramatic. And you always were evasive, I snapped. Let's skip the rerun and get to the finale. What do you want? My typewriter, she said. And the box of oil paints. I blinked. Karina, you haven't used that typewriter since you found out iPhones existed. It matters to me. You used it once to write a poem about quinoa. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off with a hand gesture that said save your breath, I already know it's recycled. Fine, I muttered, heading to the storage closet. I'll get the sacred relics. I returned with the box. Dropped it at her feet. Then, something cracked. Not anger. Not despair. Just comedy. You know, I said, leaning against the wall like a detective who had given up but still wore the badge, if someone made a movie about this, I think I'd be the guy who talks to his dog like it's a therapist. Probably wears robes too much. You'd be the femme fatale who leaves behind a scarf and $1,000 therapy bill. She laughed. And it wasn't cruel. It was genuine. That hurt worse. I'd watched that movie, she said. Yeah. Spoiler alert, it's a slow burn, but the guy ends up happy. You think that's where this is heading? Don't know. But I bought a puppy today. Her brows lifted. You did not. Want to bet? I whistled. From the kitchen came the pitter-patter of paws on laminate. A chaos of golden fur barreled in, slid on the rug, and tumbled into the room like Joy had learned to walk. This is Murphy, I said. He doesn't lie, cheat, or quote podcasts. Murphy, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, licked her ankle. She crouched to pet him. For a second, the air softened. He's cute, she said. He likes emotionally available people, I deadpanned. She laughed again, then looked up at me. I'm sorry, she said, finally. Yeah, I said. But that doesn't fix the crack in the windshield. You can still drive the car, but every time you look through it, you remember where it broke. We stood there, two people who used to finish each other's sentences and now couldn't complete a paragraph. I should go, she said, picking up her things. Probably, I replied. Murphy needs a walk. And I've got plans with someone who doesn't leave during dessert. She paused at the door. Are you really okay? No, I said. But I'm better than I was. And I'm going to be better still. She nodded once, and then she was gone. Murphy looked up at me like I'd just passed a moral exam. "You hungry?" I asked him. He wagged his tail like the world hadn't fallen apart. So I took him for a walk. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was the one moving forward. 3 days after Karina left for good, Murphy and I were walking through Millstone Park when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something said pick up. "Hello? Is this Mr. Caldwell?" "Speaking. This is Nurse Tasha from Chestnut Grove." I'm sorry to call like this, but your father asked for you. He collapsed earlier. He's stable, but it's serious." My world tightened like a knot in my chest. "Dad?" I hadn't seen him in months. Not because of bad blood, we just drifted. He was a quiet man. Former welder. Said little, felt deeply, and always smelled faintly of oil and old coffee. I got to the hospital in under an hour. He was propped up, tubes taped into him, and yet when he saw me, he smiled. "Hey," he rasped. "You still owe me a beer." "You're in cardiac care, not a dive bar," I said, forcing a laugh. He patted the empty chair. "Sit. I've got a story." It was short. Simple. He'd had a dizzy spell while fixing the bird feeder. Collapsed. EMTs found him lying in the mulch, still clutching a wrench. The man had a sense of irony. Then he looked at me. "Karina?" he asked. I shook my head. "Gone." He nodded, slowly. Didn't like how she looked through people. Like she was reading their expiration date. I didn't respond. Just sat there, letting the weight of his words settle. Then, with a grunt, he motioned to the drawer beside the bed. "Get that." Inside was a sealed envelope. Yellowed with age. "I wrote that the week your mother left," he said. "Never gave it to her. But you should read it." I unfolded the letter. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't polished. But it was real. "You said you needed to grow. I get it. I just wish you didn't have to shrink me to do it." My throat tightened. He watched me. "You think pain's supposed to look like a disaster. But the worst pain looks just like life. It shows up at dinner. It waters your plants. It pets your dog." I nodded, eyes wet. "Write her a letter," he said. "Even if you never send it. It gets the rot out." So that night, I did. I poured bourbon, lit a candle, and sat at the dining table with Murphy asleep at my feet. Then I wrote. "Karina. I don't hate you. I thought I did, but I don't. Hate takes energy. And you took that too. I hope Marco loves you in the mornings. That's when you're hardest to hold. When your dreams are still clinging to you like fog. Thank you for Bandit. And the time you made tomato soup from scratch after my surgery. And the night you let me cry without asking why. You hurt me. But I'm healing. Goodbye." I folded it, sealed it, and burned it in the sink. And I swear to you right then I felt 10 pounds lighter. The next morning, I walked into the dealership. Not as the wounded man hiding behind spreadsheets, but as someone ready to start over. Paul, my accountant, raised an eyebrow. "You look new." "I am," I said. "And we're going to sponsor the softball team again this year." "You hate softball." "I hate passive living more." I even told Anna to put up a help wanted sign. New mechanic. New energy. That afternoon, Murphy and I sat on the front porch. He was chewing a stick like it owed him rent. I was sipping iced tea, thinking about that final scene from every good movie. Sunset. Silence. Then, "Excuse me?" I looked up. She stood at the gate. Not Karina. A woman with paint on her jeans and a face that looked like it had survived a few fires too. Her dog, a clumsy black lab, sniffed Murphy. "Hi," she said. "Your dog just stole my sandwich." I looked at Murphy. He wagged like a politician caught on camera. I stood, heart pounding for no good reason. "Sorry about that. He's new. We're both learning. She smiled. And it wasn't rehearsed. Maybe you can buy me another sandwich sometime. I nodded. Yeah. Maybe I can. And just like that, something began. The next morning, Murphy took a dump in the neighbor's rose bush, and it was the most peace I'd felt in a year. I'd spent the night tossing. Not from Karina. But from something else, the stranger at the gate with paint on her jeans and lightning in her voice. Her name was Dana. She left it casually, like a jazz note played off key on purpose. And I couldn't stop thinking about her. That afternoon, she knocked. "Returned the sandwich thief," she said, her lab tugging excitedly toward Murphy. "Murphy, you little Casanova," I muttered. "Don't fall in love too fast. That's your human's job." Dana laughed. Full-throated. Not the polite chuckle I'd grown used to with Karina. This one had weight. "You free for a walk?" she asked. "I figure the dogs need it. And maybe the people too." We walked the trail behind the park. Talked about everything and nothing. She used to be a high school art teacher. Burned out. Now painted storefront windows and murals. Said it was more honest. "And you?" she asked. "I used to believe in forever," I said. "Now I sell warranties." She snorted. "God, you're dramatic. You rehearse that one?" "Only in the mirror, every night at 9:15. She bumped my shoulder. "You're weird." "I like it." By the time we made it back, Murphy and the lab were an inseparable mess of fur and drool. Dana leaned on my gatepost like she was debating the final line in a scene. "Let me guess," she said. "This is where you say this was fun," and I nod, and we both pretend not to care. I raised a brow. "You're skipping pages. That's in Act 3. So what's Act 2? I stepped closer, heart thudding. "Dinner. At the food truck lot. Thursday." She grinned. "Only if you let me pay for the sandwich." "Deal." But I picked the truck. She turned, gave me a little salute, and strolled off with her dog. And for the first time in a year, I didn't just feel okay, I felt excited. That night, my phone rang. It was Brandon. Yeah. That Brandon. My so-called best friend. "Hey, man," he started, and I could hear the guilt already dripping through the receiver like syrup off a spoiled pancake. I didn't answer. He sighed. "Look. I didn't know how to say this before. I didn't plan to what happened with Karina, it wasn't supposed to be anything." I laughed. That long, dry laugh of a man who has nothing left to break. "Brandon," I said slowly, "you are the human equivalent of a wet cigarette. You have a right to be pissed. But I'm calling because I'm getting married. To her." Silence. The kind that stings. "You want me to clap or choke on my tongue?" "No, man, I don't even know." "She wanted me to invite you." "Did she also want me to bring a bouquet or a grenade?" He didn't laugh. "I just thought you should hear it from me." I leaned back in my chair, stared at the ceiling. It was like hearing your ex burn down your house and then call to ask if you'd be the ring bearer. "Well," I said, "tell her thanks. It's nice to know she's still creative with betrayal." I hung up. And then, oddly, I smiled. Because it didn't hurt. It didn't crack me or bend me or take anything from me. It was just a page turning. And I was already onto a new chapter. At 9:15, I looked in the mirror. The line was still there. But this time, I didn't need to rehearse it. Because I had a real script now. And dinner was Thursday. There's a moment that comes after pain. A silence, not empty, but thick, like it's holding its breath. That's where I found myself the morning of their wedding. Not invited, obviously. But I knew the date. Knew the venue. Knew the man who'd be standing there with a ring he probably bought using my old Amazon account. Murphy sat beside me in the truck, head on my thigh. He didn't care about betrayal or poetic justice. He just liked being close. "Murphy," I muttered, "if anyone asks, today I'm choosing peace. But peace might come with a bourbon chaser." I didn't go. Not to the wedding. I went somewhere better. I drove to the lake. The place Karina and I went once in the early days. Before the yoga, before the betrayal, before I started measuring time and lies. I sat on the old pier. Pulled out the journal I'd started keeping. Just random lines, most of them crap, but today something came out honest. Healing doesn't feel like growing wings. It feels like dragging yourself through molasses until one day, you notice you're no longer stuck. I closed the book. And let the sun wash over me. There are things I've never said aloud. Like how I used to disappear emotionally when things got hard. I'd bury myself in projects, hide behind silence, thinking that not arguing was the same as caring. Maybe that's part of what opened the door. Every man has two lives, I remembered reading once, and the second one begins the moment he realizes he only has one. I started that second life the moment I let go of needing an explanation from Karina. She didn't leave because of one moment. She left because of 1,000 small absences that I never noticed stacking up behind her eyes. But she still cheated. Forgiveness isn't the same as return. I can forgive a fire without inviting it back into my living room. I reached into my pocket. A photo. Me and Karina. Younger. Smiling. It wasn't fake, just unfinished. I tore it in half. Dropped one piece into the lake. Kept the other. Because even in pain, not everything needs to be erased. Just revised. Murphy barked. I turned. Dana stood there, holding 2 coffees. Her shirt was paint-splattered, and her smile was the kind you find in second chances. You didn't show up to sabotage the wedding, she said. I'm impressed. I figured I'd try peace today. She handed me a coffee. And tomorrow? I sipped. Tomorrow I try honesty. Even when it's inconvenient. She sat beside me. You think we're ever done healing? She asked. I don't think it ends, I said. I think one day you just wake up and the hurt's not the first thing you taste. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Murphy flopped across our feet like a warm punctuation mark. Somewhere across town, Karina was saying I do to the man who used to be my best friend. And I didn't flinch. Because I wasn't their ghost anymore. I was something new. There's a quiet kind of joy that doesn't shout when it arrives. It doesn't kick the door down or cue the swelling music. It just walks in. Softly. Like morning light through the blinds. That's how it felt, standing in my garage 1 month later, watching Dana try to paint Murphy's paw prints onto a piece of reclaimed wood. It wasn't perfect. It was messy, actually. The dog kept moving, the paint was smudged, and we were laughing more than working. But it was real. And that's what I'd forgotten life could be. I once believed love had to be grand to be true. That it had to be dramatic or cinematic like the endings we grew up watching. But the truth is, real love shows up in the small moments, in shared coffees, gentle teasing, and someone who holds your silence like it's sacred, not awkward. I made a lot of mistakes. I won't pretend otherwise. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I tolerated neglect disguised as growth. I clung to something long after it stopped being mine. And I let loyalty keep me locked in a room where I was the only one trying to keep the lights on. But here's the thing about rock bottom, it gives you a clear foundation to build something better. And better doesn't mean perfect. It means honest. There's a quote I scribbled in my journal the day after Karina married Brandon: when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou said that. I wish I'd listened earlier. But sometimes, pain is the tuition we pay for wisdom. To anyone out there reading this, if you're in the middle of your storm, hold on. You are not the wreckage. You are the survivor. Don't chase people who make you question your worth. Don't accept crumbs when you were made for whole loaves. And don't ever confuse chaos for passion. Love doesn't have to burn to be real. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's soft. Sometimes it's as simple as someone choosing you again and again with no hesitation. Dana handed me the finished wood print. Murphy's paw. Our initials. A crooked little heart between them. Think it'll hold up? She asked. I smiled. It already has. She leaned into me. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I realized I didn't want the old life back. I wanted this one. This new one. Built from the ashes. Built on truth. So here's to the cracks. The broken things. The hearts that still choose to beat, even after betrayal. And to you, reading this, may your endings hurt just enough to make your new beginnings honest. We don't always get to choose the pain. But we do get to choose what comes next. And what comes next? Well, that's the best part.